Thanks, Elaine, and thanks, Shawn, for joining. And I want to thank everyone who's taken time out of their busy schedules to join us for this webinar. My name is Jeff Kukowski. I'm the CEO of CloudBolt, and I'm joined by Shawn Petty, who's our Chief Customer Officer. Shawn most recently came, as Elaine said, from IBM, who is a customer of ours and an MSP, and a very good one at that, serving the U.S. federal government. And we're pleased to have him on board. Our goals today really are, in the title. Each organization, many of our customers and our service providers, all of us are up against this challenge of taking what's been done, the goodness that's been done in different parts of the organization with different subject matter experts, and trying to elevate that to an organizational level, which is a challenge for everybody, right? Because people own their pieces of the world. They do it to benefit themselves and their teams, but you can't actually accelerate digital transformation if you kind of pick that up a level and orchestrate the goodness that's been built and federate the tools that have been out there. So I also want to make a point. Please interrupt us. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion going, but this webinar is for all of you. Interrupt us in the chat. Elaine will come in and say, "Hey, this person has a question," and we not only be happy to answer it. I think the webinar is more valuable to everyone if you ask your most difficult challenges.
Absolutely.
Part of the reason why I'm so happy to have Shawn here is that Shawn has lived automation for most of his career, not only serving IBM but helping IBM to serve its customers. So we want to try to learn a little bit from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Shawn, let's start at the beginning. Just a little bit of your background. You most recently came from IBM. Maybe you can share with the world, kind of how you see automation and being able to elevate this idea of taking silos and bringing orchestration more to the organizational level.
Absolutely. So my background is I've been in IT since IT became a thing. So a little over 30 years ago, I learned my first couple of Unix commands, and I've been a systems engineer and architect and technical delivery management, and most recently at IBM, a product owner of this cloud orchestration tool capability that we serve today to our clients. So over the last 5 years, kind of helping clients bring a lot of their automations into an up-level orchestration capability has been kind of my primary focus, helping not only IBM's clients, but IBM's managed service practice as well to realize that same goal where they had a disparate organization of siloed capabilities, an OS management capability, a network management capability, an observability stack, a security stack. All of those organizations operate really, really well. Inside of those organizations, they operate in a manner where they write automations, they take advantage of automation capabilities inside of their tool sets to make not only their lives easier, but the delivery out to those organizations that they're serving faster. I think largely what we were able to do from a cloud management platform perspective is to bring to light the capability that you could not only automate inside of one of those silos or two of those silos, but you could bring those automations into a larger orchestration framework to where you could reach out across. Because ultimately what they're delivering is workloads with services out to their organization. So it wasn't just how do I bring a new workload or how do I bring a new piece of storage or a new piece of network capability to the client. It's how do I bring it in such a way that IBM can actually manage it, monitor it, take care of it from a day two perspective, break fix, all of those capabilities they were providing to do that, you need a lot of teams to work succinctly together. They need to all understand the capabilities. And that's really what the cloud management platform was able to provide for them, was a capability of saying, I can take the best of what you do in your team and the best of what they do in their team. And, the other 8 or 9 teams it took to stand up whatever that workload was. And I can bring them all into one orchestration such that I'm now operating as if I were the best person on your team, the best person on your team, the best person on all of the other teams. And I can bring this workload to market in a fraction of the time that it takes all of us to do those things, those individual automations at our own level.
Got it. So the typical customer, be it helping IBM managed services to deliver more, better, faster, cheaper, more securely, and more compliant, et cetera. When you would survey a customer, that's what most customers look like. You have subject matter experts, you have silos of goodness. Tell me about, how do you get to the first conversation of, you've got all these teams of subject matter experts, why change? Where does that epiphany happen typically in an organization where people say, we can do more with this. We can take it from a personal level with something great that's been done in Terraform, or a team level with something that's been great, done very well with Ansible, and we can take it to an organizational level.
Yeah, so as we all know, change is real. Aversion to change is even more real. It's definitely, you get more people who don't want to change the status quo. Because IT operations is cyclical. IT operations takes a cycle to continue to work. And a lot of times we don't want to break that cycle to try and interrupt it with something new or change it to something new. So I'm really busy,
I have a lot going on. You want me to look at yet another thing to do to make that easier.
Exactly. Okay. Let me tell you how I can make it easier by introducing something completely new that you now have to take on. So
that's
really,
what I'm after.
Yeah. So really what it takes is it typically comes from your top performers in your industry. So in our case, it came from, the chief architect office where, he identified an opportunity where we have all these great people and we have all these great processes and we have all these great capabilities and we're buying new tools and we're extending ourselves out into tools. How could we take all of those tools and get the best out of all of them, right? And I think, doing that evaluation and setting up that evaluation, that's typically where it'll come from inside of an organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be from the chief architect. It really just has to come from a space of vision where you can look outside of the problems or the issues that maybe everyone suffers from, and of course your organization is suffering from, and realize that there's real opportunity to bring something new to the table. So I think that's really where it probably comes from, is really from a top performer perspective that can look at the overall organization and say, here is how I can make myself better.
Okay. So are there any things happening in the industry that would be a good impetus for that visionary, for that architect, things like uncertainty in the economy, cost being a focus, the organization wanting to take on another cloud, the organization wanting to take on another tool? Are there good kind of leverage points for that visionary or that architect to say, okay, this is the time that we should be looking at kind of taking orchestration to the organization rather than just making it an IT problem, an automation team problem, et cetera?
I think most high-performing organizations have a structure in their organization set up to feed that kind of capability. And what I mean by that is each one of your, I would call them siloed leaders, right? Each one of your stack leaders comes to someone like a chief architect, a chief, delivery capability, and says, I think I have an idea of how I can perform better. And what it really takes is someone collectively saying, if we introduce this, how much disruption does it cause here? But more so, does it help us with any of the other opportunities we have from other capabilities inside of our organization? So I think that having something collective like an orchestration engine, which, obviously we provide, having that kind of capability opens you up to saying, where maybe you would have said, I know there's a new automation capability and we would love to bring that automation capability on. However, to do that, we have to offset all of this other automation capability. So the adoption of something new becomes tenuous to, an overall delivery leader, where they're looking at, this is going to hurt delivery because now we're going to replace it with something new. Where having something like CloudBolt in the background to say, we don't have to adopt it all right away, right? What we can really do is just adopt the capabilities as we develop them. One of the examples that I'll give, right, is we used at IBM in the managed service practice, they used Puppet, and they did a lot of automations with Puppet, and the team wrote a lot of great capability around that. And then fast forward a year and a half, and IBM buys Red Hat, and Red Hat brings Ansible along, and the powers that be say all will be Ansible. So that's a little,
makes sense.
It makes sense.
How do you work through that?
Yeah. So the way they're working through that, and they're still continuing to work through that, is to say all of the best things that Puppet did, maybe there's some things that we retain. If the Ansible tool comes in and it provides these other capabilities that are over and above what we're doing with Puppet, those will be our first use cases. And from an orchestration engine perspective, we were already orchestrating Puppet in where it went in the sequence of events to build new things, to do new things, to change existing things. We were already doing that. So what we did was, as the new Ansible capabilities come on, they fold into the overall orchestrations where they're supposed to be. And it's a plug and replace inside of the blueprint, inside of the day two operations. You're removing one capability, you're introducing another capability. Of course, all this is going through test and QA development, right? So we're following the normal life cycle, but you're replacing one with another. So the interruption is less about rewrite everything we had in Puppet. Now it's all in Ansible. Okay, now we'll start using the Ansible.
So even in serving customers or clients, they go through those very same issues where the powers that be, the visionaries, say we want more standardization, right? Some organizations would say we want more standardization. Some would say leave it to the teams to figure out what tools they want to use.
Right.
Is the general answer both? Leave what works, replace what's needed?
I think
do you see that?
I think the answer is, where people want to drive, that singularity of tool, then that's what works for them. And, that should still be in place. However, in today's economy, especially, leaving some of that capability up to the experts, right? I mean, we're hiring experts. We're hiring cloud experts. We're hiring subject matter experts. When they come to you and say things would be a lot better if we used this tool or that capability, we should have a framework that allows them that flexibility from an IT perspective to be able to venture into that, tie that into the operations, and see if it does, see if it proves itself out. Having a tool like CloudBolt to bring that into the organization in such a way that it doesn't have to touch everything, right? We can test it, right. We can make sure that it works, and then we can operationalize it. And most importantly, we can programmatically bring it into the organization. Because in a lot of cases, when new tools come in, to get the value out of that tool, you might have to involve other technology stacks. You might have to involve other IT folks into that operation. So the question becomes, especially from an overall security posture and those sorts of things, it's like, do we really allow all these people into this tool? Do we really want to have 19 users or 35 users in this tool that really don't know what they're doing? With CloudBolt, we can do the integration, tie it into an orchestration, and say, operate when I need you to operate. And that way, we don't need to read anyone else into that tool. We don't have to onboard anyone else into that capability. We can just use that capability that's being curated in the background by subject matter experts in real time to benefit the organization, as opposed to causing chaos inside of the organization.
Okay. So if I'm the subject matter expert or the team that owns network or a certain cloud or a certain capability, you're basically saying we can help you scale without having a lot of people who should not have access to the underlying tool
Right.
to actually do their jobs without having access to the underlying tool.
Absolutely.
And also making your lives easier with the tools or the services that you own providing to the organization.
Yeah, and I think it makes for a happier workforce, quite frankly. Because if you think about it, in an enterprise, it's easy to dictate out, we're not going to do it this way, we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
If you're a managed service provider, you have a little different set of rules, because in a managed service provider, your client's going to come to you and say, this is how we do things, right? As when we're in Azure, we use ARM templates. We don't want you building capability out here. We want you using our ARM templates. So you have to have a flexible capability to be able to incorporate that into your daily operations, right? Because you're taking on someone else's capability, and you're going to have to perform the way they want you to perform.
Right.
So managed services organizations have a little different set of rules than an enterprise that can dictate capability.
Okay, so let me just press a little bit harder on when the visionary has a vision to bring orchestration up a level higher, take all the goodness of what's been done and federate that across the organization. What most often goes wrong when that visionary or that architect goes to a team that owns that tool or that service? What often goes wrong, and what advice do you have? I think you've given some advice on how to get that person over the hump, but just more explicitly before I go in a different direction.
That's okay. So yeah, there's obvious. I mentioned earlier, there is aversion to change. People definitely do not want to break out of their comfort zones in a lot of cases. So I think what has worked well in getting people over the hump is to really dive in with that team and understand, let's take a look at the types of things that your team has to do every day. Let's take a look at the capabilities that you have to do. Let's take a look at what your challenges are, right? And identify one or two use cases that are really bothersome. Everyone has one or two use cases where they're like, in some cases that I personally ran across, it was, we have this really expensive resource, that when we get this particular request in, that really expensive resource has to sit down and press 17 different buttons in a sequence, be it inside of a cloud console, inside of a tool. And to the leader of that team, they look at that like, this is a complete waste of time because I'm paying a really expensive resource to do something that could be automated. So what they'll do is they'll naturally drive automation into that. The problem is, how do I share that automation out to my organization in such a way that I want them to consume it, right? And in a lot of cases, it means whatever tool you used, whatever script you used, you're giving access to that to the rest of the organization, which is very scary. Because in a lot of cases, it's a lot of very powerful technology that you're really putting in the hands of, I have no idea who you are, or I have no idea what you're going to do with this.
And they're certainly not trained on the tool.
Correct. Right. No one is trained on the tool, right? That's why you have subject matter experts. Right. So handing it over to an operation engine, right? An orchestration engine like CloudBolt makes a little more sense, right? So it brings it into the fold. And I think what you do is you find those one or two use cases and you solve those for the naysayer, for the person who maybe doesn't want to budge on it. And when you do solve that and they do see the value, and I now have my really expensive subject matter expert back to do the things I really need to do to solve the real problems that I have, that's really powerful, and it really does change the minds.
Got it. So you go from being a person who has, hey, look, I can really help you solve problems if you just put some more time into another tool. You go towards the give me a big problem, or give me a really wasteful problem, or give me your hardest problem, and I'll try to solve that for you.
Right.
Got it. Okay, makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's maybe go in a different direction. Let's talk about when things go right. Right. So when you get orchestration at a more organizational level, a more visionary level, and you take all the goodness that's been done in different silos of automation, different subject matter expert teams, automation teams, separate teams. What do the results look like? So talk about when it really goes well. Like, how do the metrics change? What claims can be made? How much time is saved? Like, how does the organization change? Like, do subject matter experts become automation experts? Like, what happens when it goes right?
I think what happens over time is, you're right. There is a lot of subject matter experts become automation experts because they start to believe in the power of what's possible, and they start to see some of the feedback and some of the capability. And what it really does from an organization perspective is it broadens the organization's capabilities. If it took me 2 or 3 days to deliver something from an MSP perspective, and now I can do that in 20 minutes, that changes the type of work maybe that I go after, right? Maybe there were clients, maybe there were things that we've looked at in the past and we've said, organizationally, it would really take us a lot of time to take on, maybe it's a clip level, that many workloads or that many clouds or that many, new technologies at one time, where now you're looking at, I've got half of my year back, right, in delivery. So now maybe we can tackle and take on some of those larger challenges or those larger business objectives that you have.
Okay, so that MSP can either take on more business, or it can do the existing business faster, more proprofitably. And that's
Absolutely.
The same for any budget holder on an automation team.
Absolutely. Yeah, inside of an enterprise, inside of a budget, it really changes the dynamics of what you're doing, because now you have, maybe you had a fleet of subject matter experts because you had something that was, tangibly harder to do than anything else in your organization. And now you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, now we've taken a lot of the button clicking away from those subject matter experts. What can we really do with those subject matter experts? What other technologies can they bring into the organization and research to bring into the organization to actually bring the value of our product and the value to the business down to the point where we can, shift the dynamic of the actual company? Maybe we can start providing services that we never thought we could provide before.
Got it. So you don't have to name names of clients, that you've served, but let's go one step further. You were telling me a story once about one of the clients or teams that you had served where they may have had, for the sake of easy numbers, 70 or 100 subject matter experts performing their role, with their expertise around, whatever capability or service that they owned. How did that change? Like just, again, without naming names, you can talk through, like, when you get it right, within a year, what's possible? By the numbers, what's possible?
Yeah. So, really, according to how efficient you are or inefficient you've become over time with business, you really get yourself into what I would call a people ad situation, where if you're an MSP and you're servicing a lot of different clients and you're taking on, 50, 100 clients and you're servicing them all, then there's a typical clip level that you're looking at. You're saying, I need this many of this expert and this many of this expert because I've based it on workload, or I've based it on throughput, or I've based it on, space that we're servicing. So you're building your workforce around that. When you really start to introduce automation and then especially orchestrations of those automations on top, you really start to bring down that capability. You're really just increasing the ratio. You're saying Jeff used to be able to do 100 workloads in a month, and now you're saying, wow, Jeff can do 20, workloads in a week, and he can do, maybe 25 workloads in a week. So you're starting to change the ratio of what you can do, which really gives you your manpower back. So the adjustment of manpower, of course, is organizational, right? If your goal is to decrease manpower, you can most certainly decrease manpower pretty substantially, pretty quick. What most organizations do is they take the power of those people that they have and the knowledge that those people have organizationally, and they get to move that around, right? If I get 40 hours of Jeff back, then I'm going to use that 40 hours of Jeff to go over here and solve these larger problems, this technical debt issue that we know we've had for a year and a half. I can actually get to that now.
Got it. So that's good feedback. If I were to ask you just to peg a number, right? So you've got an organization that has 100 subject matter experts. If you were to be able to reclaim a certain amount of time from those subject matter experts, if you do it right, can you reclaim 50% of their time, 40% of their time?
I think you can probably reclaim about 70% of their time.
Okay, that's a big claim.
Yeah. I think you can reclaim about 70% of their time, because a lot of delivery is monotony. A lot of delivery is the same process over and over and over again, which is why you see teams, that are very personnel centric. You see them, they make mistakes, because if you're turning over thousands of workloads a month, you're turning over thousands of, firewall rules a month, then you're going to make mistakes, right? There are things that are going to happen inside of a personnel driven organization that are going to happen. So being able to say, I know I can do this predictably, right, through an automation inside of this larger orchestration, I can now drive that capability down to a really low level, maybe even a 24-hour capability, where, you have a fleet of people who are coming through that maybe are just entering their IT careers. If they know that this is what I need to get done, and this is what I do inside of CloudBolt to get that done,
right, then
you can train them to do that. Now you're removing all of that stack above it, right? So if you start thinking about just the delivery of a workload inside of a managed service provider, an IaaS provider that delivers a service with maintenance, with managed services around it, you're taking out probably, what used to take 2 or 3 days worth of work. You're taking all of that work out of your organization, and you're putting it in the hands of someone who is just learning to do IT. So that's
a big claim.
It's a lot of things to pull back.
That's a big claim. I think 70. Oh, please.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How quickly was the orchestration toolkit deployed?
The toolkit itself, so we were building a service around it. So it was deployed in probably a couple of weeks. Operational has been an ongoing effort, right? Because with any orchestration tool like CloudBolt, you're building more and more capability into it. But from a managed service perspective, we took over the managed service practice and started delivering the capability to the managed service practice. And just in the first quarter, we were delivering results to that managed service provider, in the sense that they could start delivering workloads and doing tangible things that they had been doing with personnel. We were doing in the first 3 months. By the first 6 months, we had tackled probably about 65 or 70% of their top 5 use cases. In other words, what are we spending the most time as an organization doing? Things like IAM, changing passwords, unlocking passwords, those sorts of things. We were doing all of that capability within the first 6 months.
So first 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and thank you for the question. Please add more to chat, and Elaine can interrupt my questions of Shawn as you have more questions. Let's talk about the people. So you have all these subject matter experts. The claim is, if you do it right, you can repurpose those experts onto higher value opportunities. Like, talk about the career pathing for people. You talked about a new person being able to come in and accomplish higher level items. What does it mean to the career paths of these subject matter experts? Do they go from tech experts to being more programmatic experts? Like, what does that do for them?
I think what really benefits them is an opportunity to do things that are at a higher level, that are really affecting more change. So I think about myself, young in my career, as, learning Unix for the first time and understanding that, there's a profession built around being a Unix systems administrator, where the more I knew, the more valuable I was. Shift that into the dynamic that, lots of people know what I know. Lots of people have written automation around what I know. My value is becoming less, right? So if I'm in a job where I'm clicking the same, we'll use the 17 buttons, I'm clicking the same 17 buttons every day, I'm starting to feel less valuable to this organization, because I know that there's that there's automation that I can write around this and click those 17 buttons for me, right? So what am I really providing for myself from a career perspective? And what am I really providing to the organization? So really what you want is an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to go learn some of the new capability that maybe you haven't brought into your organization. But how do I get that time to do that, right? Okay. So automation is the natural selection there. You go out, you find some automation, you automate what you do, and you go back to your leadership and you say, now, can I go tackle this problem? Or can I go tackle that problem? And I think from an organization's perspective, you want to be receptive to that. You want to enable those subject matter experts to go out and solve those problems and bring those things to you, bring new capabilities, bring new features into the environment. And being able to do that helps you retain those subject matter experts, quite frankly, because there is another opportunity at another company to do those types of things.
Sure.
And they don't have the day-to-day issues that you have.
Sure.
So not optimizing and not orchestrating really ends up hurting the business because it just becomes an attrition event.
So as you were describing what this means to maybe a subject matter expert's career, and you kind of overlay that with just the overwhelming challenges of multi-cloud, right? You have all of these major platforms with all sorts of things to learn. Layer in, so many fantastic new tools that are out there. I guess the opportunities for them to look more programmatically at how to make those things work could be a real game changer. I mean, it's not a secret that there's a skills gap everywhere. Right, and there's a maturity curve regardless of the service or tool that you're trying to learn.
Absolutely, and the only way for you to grow as an individual is to be able to dabble inside of all of those things. Right, gone are the days where I think people learn like one skill. I'm a Windows expert. I'm a Unix expert. I'm a Cisco expert. Those days have long since passed, and I think the people who are coming into IT understand that, right? And they're demanding more because they understand that. They're like, I'm going to be a much wider operations for you than you have today because I've had opportunity to grow that skill set, right? I'm an automation engineer. I'm a CI/CD expert. Being an expert means I'm not just a Jenkins expert. I understand all of the tool set. I understand all of the stack. I understand why it all fits together. That's the person that you strive to be. And I think more people in the industry understand that today.
Okay, so again, if you can take orchestration more towards the organizational level, look at it as a higher order, you can not only get better efficiencies, you can grow your people, you can get more program level expertise to solve the more important problems.
Absolutely.
Okay. But you had mentioned another story, and this one was new to me. The idea of business continuity and disaster recovery and what a proper automation orchestration capability can do, even around a space where you wouldn't necessarily associate the two. Again, you don't have to name names, but you'd mentioned a client or an organization you had served where, when there was the SolarWinds incident, there are any number of companies that were thinking, oh gosh, there's a lot I have to rebuild with all my subject matter experts, kind of linearly or in parallel, and there was a lot of time. Maybe you can tell that story because that was a really interesting use case of when you get this right, another benefit to the organization.
Yeah, so part of disaster recovery is recovering, right? Business continuity is one thing. Do we keep running because we have this event? Sure, we can keep running. I think not to pick on SolarWinds, but I think the SolarWinds event scared a lot of folks, right? Because it was, this affected your business continuity as well because the vulnerability had been there for so long. It had more than likely crept into, where you're doing site recovery, where you're doing whatever your business continuity case is. So it really was a true disaster recovery event potential. Luckily, it did not turn into a disaster recovery event potential for most of the clients. But a lot of folks were faced with, how do I rebuild everything from scratch? And I think that becomes, paramount in people's mind. Like, could I rebuild everything from scratch? And one of the clients that we were servicing, we had been servicing for about 3.5 years at that point. They were very mature. Every single one of their applications in their stack had a blueprint in the capability to be able to redeploy that entire application stack. So they were kind of, just crossed arms waiting on like, are we going to have to do this? Because if we are, then I think we're okay, right? We're a couple of weeks away from being back up and running, where a lot of other organizations were scrambling, thinking to themselves, how are we going to rebuild all of this, right? I mean, we built this maybe 6 years ago and we've changed it 700 times in the last 6 years. How are we going to get back to where we are today? Other than, we're calling back a bunch of, tape from Iron Mountain to recover where we were a year and a half ago or wherever it was that SolarWinds had identified, right? And then how do we mature it back to the state that it's in now? It was really an eye-opening experience for a lot of people. But understanding that, we were taking not only their blueprints of here's how you rebuild the application, but we were curating those blueprints along the way. Right. As operating systems were upgraded and patched, as their application was upgraded and patched, we were rolling in those changes into the actual blueprints themselves.
So for any automation team, cloud ops team, any MSP, the idea of disaster recovery, the idea of business continuity, the idea of using orchestration at a higher level, having a blueprint around being able to rebuild quickly,
helps you sleep at night.
is kind of an added benefit,
yeah.
Right? Is it an added benefit that many people think of, or are most people thinking in a more traditional sense around the tools and the capabilities to get back online?
I think largely most people don't think about it, right? It's kind of like the lock on the door. The lock on the door is there, so therefore I sleep, right? If the lock was busted, you would think about how you're going to fix it, right? And that mentality is how a lot of people approach. I have a business continuity plan. I have a disaster recovery plan. Most people do disaster recovery testing. Most MSPs provide disaster recovery testing every single year to be able to prove that you can do that. What they don't take into account is all of that affected by the fact that, my systems have potentially been owned for 18 months. How do I get back to there? Can I go back 18 months? Do I even have that kind of recovery point objective with my managed service provider? So again, as this particular client was building their applications, the tool, the vulnerability was in the tool that was touching it, right? So that was never baked into the actual application itself or the OS itself. So rebuilding it means I'm not owned anymore, right? So they could go back to square one. And oh, by the way, the recovery point was the last time we did an application upgrade. So it was just an enviable position for them to be in, and they didn't realize it until they were faced with it.
That's great. So I want to be conscious of time. Shawn and I have continued the conversation. Are there any other questions from the folks participating on the webinar? Anything in chat, Elaine, or anything that any of our participants want to ask?
At this time?
Not at this time?
Yes, not yet, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. So, Shawn, I have, one last question for you, right?
Sure.
And then we'll do a wrap here. Undoing silos with more orchestration. We've talked a lot about looking at it from a higher level. We've talked about kind of what creates that first conversation? Where does that come from? I think any of our customers that have a vision, be it architects, cloud ops, IT ops, leaders that say, we can do more here, and we can do it faster, and we can do it better, and we can do it more securely. There's a difference between vision and actually getting it done, right? So you've given us a lot of good advice on, how do you take the idea that change is real and aversion to change is real, and get that tool owner or that subject matter expert over the line with maybe taking on really tough scenario. I think you've given us some good advice for what that could mean. And again, I think 70% is a really bold claim. One that I would invite our customers or anybody on the webinar. If you want to go deeper on that with Shawn, certainly reach out, and we can help you get there, or at least give you some ideas on how to get there. Anything you want to say to our webinar participants as a wrap on being able to, the value around taking what's good and making it available to everybody? Any final comments that you think would be helpful?
I think really it's just about taking and accepting that challenge and understanding that if you really do have a vision and you really do have a capability where you're in some of the scenarios that maybe we've talked about, where I know we have these siloed orchestrations. I know we have some really good things inside of these technology stacks, but I also understand that programmatically we're still doing this and then we're doing this and then we're doing this. Accepting that challenge and bringing something like a CloudBolt to the forefront and saying, hey, I really think this can be a capability, right? Entry into this space is easy. Entry into this capability is easy. And, take that challenge, reach out, go be the right guy, right?
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate having you on board as well as our Chief Customer Officer. So thank you, everyone, for participating today. Certainly reach out with questions, with follow-up, anywhere we can help you. So thank you all.